no masks here.
Good enough.
Well, I was gonna go to
Okay,
the
well,
bank
thank you very
afterward.
much.
Motion to open the
Motion
meeting
to open the meeting.
at
Government
5.
study. Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
5:34.
You look good on the television show, you know, you look really good. Look at you there.
All right, let's open the meeting to order. I wanted to just briefly mention to the public that this is our second meeting of the Town Government Study Committee, and our charge from the Board of Selectmen is to explore the possibility of recommending to the town either a town manager or town administrator, and also potentially making suggestions for changing some of the functions, administrative functions of our government, and perhaps even some town departments. We anticipate meeting roughly every 2 weeks, and we don't have an end date. I think our work is very much study-focused, and perhaps we'll have a deliverable initial draft sometime in the winter, either before or after the holidays, for the Board of Selectmen to consider. We don't have a target date as to when we would make the recommendation, because we want to continue and be very diligent and very thorough in our study before we begin to write any proposals or any recommendations. So I'd like to first go around the table here and introduce the volunteers. To my right, Betty Gorski. Thank you, Betty, for your years of service and continuing in a number of capacities.
Good to see you all. Do I have to hit the button here or something?
That's it.
Is that
We're on
okay? I don't want to get off on the wrong.
And Mr. John Osborne, thank you, John, for serving again.
Very good, thank you.
And Mr. Michael Dempsey, thank you, Michael. Michael is also the secretary. Sorry, I'm just riveted by the paperwork in front of me. Thank you, John, for your service as well, Attorney Christopher. So let me go over the agenda item for the committee and the public, and then we'll get right into it.
Well, first you might want to approve the minutes, huh?
All right?
May I suggest
You want to make a motion?
Well, I thought we needed to wait a couple of weeks. Isn't there 2 weeks?
No.
No? Okay. Make a motion to approve the minutes. What was the date of the meeting?
August 25th.
Of August 25th, okay.
I can make a motion to approve the minutes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Joe sign those.
Thank you.
Just sign that and give it back to me.
September 15th, my goodness, time is flying. Summer's almost over. There you go. All right, so the agenda item for tonight consists of 4 topics. The first one, we want to review the relevant statutes and Massachusetts general laws regarding town manager and town administrator. And Christopher John did a tremendous job by doing some research and providing us with a lot of reading and studying material. So I know that I'll continue to work through that document, but I will have a question for John later regarding the statutes here. We also want to review what is the difference between a town manager and a town administrator. We want to really bear down on that distinction, because I think that will be very instrumental, very significant as to what we may recommend. And there is a difference. And the difference is actually quite interesting. And hopefully in our discussion tonight, we can drill down a little bit into that. If it's possible, perhaps we can vote tonight for a suggestion to initiate a draft document to recommend at some point in the future either a town manager or a town administrator. We'll see how the discussion goes. And then lastly, we want to review some departmental changes that we discussed at the last meeting. For the members of the public, I do recommend that you get ask for a copy of the minutes from the August 25th meeting, and you'll find some very interesting information regarding some of the potential recommendations that this committee may make after we complete our study. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with some of the relevant statutes. John, I have a question for you. if you needed to pick a statute, assuming that we were going to perhaps recommend a town administrator, which is kind of where we were leaning at the last meeting, what is the statute that we could hang on to and say, this is it?
Well, the reason I put that memorandum together, because the more I looked into it, there's 3 areas in which you can do an administrative leadership position. One is the Charter Commission, which is, I believe is 243. That's a very involved situation. We have to, put together a Charter Commission, and it has to go out to the voters. It's about an 18-month process to begin with. The second area is what they call special acts, town administrator, town manager. And I think we've done that before when we expanded the Board of Selectmen. We had to go to the legislature and get a special act, and it's done frequently. In fact, what I read is it takes up about 3/4 of the legislative agenda up at the State House. It's all the communities with
All
their
special
special
acts.
acts, all different types of things. And the third one is the Chapter 43, Chapter 41, Section 23A, which basically allows the selectmen to do it by bylaw through town meeting. And to me, in looking at that, we can debate that, but it appears to be a very limited approach to the situation. It basically puts together a bylaw where the bylaw has to be written in such a way that the town administrator who is selected basically acts for and through the selectmen. It's really their agent, and it basically doesn't really give that administrator any type of independent power unless the selectmen want to try to give it to him, but then somebody can say, well, wait a minute, he acts through you. He's really your agent, so you really can't delegate too much power that he can act independently. In the memorandum, I kind of laid out the pros and cons of each one. At first, I thought the bylaw would be the best way to go, because it's very convenient. It's putting your toe in the water, but the more I thought about it, maybe a town manager or an administrative position through special acts legislation, which is one step beyond creating a bylaw. You have to go to the legislature, but you essentially, it basically establishes a special acts charter. That's your first step.
John, did you mention in here that if we go the third one, it's much easier for a cavalier group of residents who are not very keen on the idea, essentially upset the apple cart, so to speak?
Theoretically, you could put the town administrator position in
Jeopardy.
through a bylaw, and the next year, because a renegade town meeting could eliminate the position. You could do that with a special act, but you have to go one step further and convince the legislature that this is a good thing to do.
So let me go around. I wanted to, let me start with Betty. You've seen changes to government here done in many ways. One of them is through bylaws. I've never experienced that. Through special acts, which means we go to the legislature and pitch them the idea that we want to change something significant here in government, and then ultimately with public hearings both at the State House and here, a law is created, signed into law by the governor, and then we can move from there. And then, of course, we've had, the Board of Selectmen just making decisions within their authority. Like, for example, the selection of police chiefs and fire chiefs and so forth. What's your intuition say? How do you feel about the bylaw pathway, pros and cons, with your experience?
For 15 years, I sat on the Board of Selectmen. There were 3 of us. And we were fortunate to have an administrative assistant that was very helpful to us. She was here every day. Sorry. And I left the Board of Selectmen when 5 members came on board. So as I watched through the years, I noticed Denise seem to have a lot of administrative, and I don't want to use the word power, but she was here every day. She did the lion's, and that the Board of Selectmen, listened to her. I'm sure they weighed in on how they felt. They went into executive session several times. I was leaning towards the town administrator, as I think we all were. And, but, John Christopher, Attorney John Christopher, has worked with many cities and towns and seen it all. And my question was going to be to John. You've lived in the town a long time. Do you favor one over the other, or is one easier to implement, or?
Well, like I said, doing it by the bylaw would be the easiest way of implementation. I don't think it's the best way to grow the position as the town grows, because at some point, from what I've been reading, the form of government that's trending in the Commonwealth is what they call the centralized government, where you have like a pyramid or a triangle with the person at the top and all the people underneath it. And I think it's done that way because of the complexity of government. Even though we're a small town, you look at the Uniform Procurement Act. I mean, that can make your head spin to begin
Sure.
with. But you have to start giving, I think, an administrator, whether you call it a town manager or a town administrator, you have to give them some independent power to act in what they believe is the best interest of the town, based upon being hired by the selectmen, the type of person they are, their professionalism. I initially thought the bylaw would be the way to put your toe in the water.
Right.
But I think the powers of the position, what he or she is supposed to do, what they shouldn't be doing, and maybe, that's the best way to go. I just see it as, I see the bylaw approach because of its limitation. What I see basically just an agency relationship between town administrator and the Board of Selectmen. I think a Board of Selectmen in today's environment, at least from what I've seen in other towns, is really, they set policy.
Right.
They say, you go and do the job, and here's the description of the job based upon the position and the bylaw or the special acts administration, and go that way. After reading all this, I favor the special acts.
I'm going to ask Mike to chime in, but young man, would you be able to accommodate Mr. Andrew Cox? He's also one of our members. Sure. And then, Andrew, I'll ask your opinion as well.
Yep, thank you.
And thank you for your service. We appreciate it. So continuing on that topic, Mike, what's your opinion, your intuition? I know you have many years of experience as well, supporting and serving our town.
Sure. Yes, that, to me, it somewhat goes back to which we want. If we want a town manager with more authority, then I think clearly we'd have to go with the special legislation, just to really put everything in there that we wanted to be able to do. If we want to go with the town administrator, I think we could do it by either the special act or the local bylaw. I have done special act myself with changing a property over to just make it not under a certain form that it was purchased, to be able to put it into a state conservation restriction. And that took, over a year to do, and I had to keep hounding the legislatures and all the subcommittees that had to approve it. So, if we're gonna do it that way, we're gonna be prepared for the time it's gonna take to do it.
Andrew, I know you came in late, but special legislation is similar to what we did with the five-member board,
Mhm.
where we basically went to the legislature. We had the help of Senator Bruce Tarr and Representative Lenny Mira help us draft legislation, which eventually became law, had to be signed by the governor, and then it came back, and then we approved it. So that's special legislation. Another pathway is we make changes locally here within our bylaws, which has some limitations. So based on a little bit of that information, I don't know if you had an opportunity to study some of the work that, the resources that John Christopher put together for us, but what's your gut feeling?
My
Which way-
initial feeling is the easy route is obviously the bylaw, as stated before. But with the special legislation, if we're making this change for the town that's going to last for as long as we can see into the future, I think the longer, proper process with more input along the way would probably be favorable.
Yes.
Make a comment after hearing these comments, Mike particularly. The legislative process, you probably know too, it's going to take months, maybe. Doing the research, I noticed that, I think it was the town of Hingham started out by doing Chapter 41, Section 23A bylaw. And then they took that bylaw and turned it into a special acts legislation later on. And I think they're thinking with, let's get started right away with someone in here to help the selectmen. And in that process, while he or she is sitting here, we can then do the special acts and move forward to establish the position that Andrew,
If that hybrid's an option, it certainly
yeah, it's a
appeals.
hybrid, yeah.
Well, I don't want to get into the minds of the Board of Selectmen, but after watching a few meetings and after I made my presentation here, and I don't think that I would say that this would be the case for this particular committee, I would think that in the great scheme of things, they would wish to have things done a little bit sooner rather than later. I feel that they're wonderful, dedicated volunteers, but this town has to be professionally managed. We need to hold people accountable, professional managers, and, yeah, my fantasy is I'd like to study and study and study and discuss and maybe do it, certainly do it the proper way, but maybe introducing the idea of a bylaw, getting it implemented, and then letting it stick a little bit longer for 100 or 200 years, but making it a law. My only comment about the bylaw, it seems slightly less democratic. It seems like less people involved. Possibly, unless people attend meetings and pay attention and show up at town meeting and have a voice, it could be just a few people making a decision that is pretty monumental, that we're changing a significant way of how we're governing ourselves. That's the only concern. But I think if we do it properly and we beg people to get involved and watch the meetings and attend the public sessions, I think that it should work. I mean,
Can I have a say here?
absolutely. That's my opinion.
I'd like to read something that you've given us, John. The relative ease by which the statute permits implementation of a town administrator is a two-edged sword, which on one hand promotes ease of implementation, but on the other hand grants die-hard dissidents of change an opportunity to eliminate the position through a warrant article posted on a special agenda of a special or annual town meeting, which essentially reinforces what you were just saying. My suggestion here at this juncture is that having read through all this material, it's very obvious to me that Hingham is the best one of the group, and that West Newbury wants to control everything that this poor person of that town to do. In other words, West Newbury is somewhat frightened of giving too much power to this administrator. And as you read it, it's hidebound, it's very hidebound. What I'd like us to do is to take all these documents that you gave us of the different towns and take out all the sections that are similar and see put them on a piece of paper, different interpretations of the same issues, and then select which one we thought was more appropriate for us, and stitch them together and see what we come up with. I'm more than happy to go through that torturous process and clean out, and essentially it means taking apart each one of these written documents and separating these sections out and putting them so you can compare them.
If you eliminate the cities in Massachusetts and you eliminate a few towns such as Groveland and a few others that don't have professional administration, you're looking at probably about 260 documents.
No, but I'm suggesting here that just as a
No, I
matter of
understand.
argument, to take the materials that you've already given us.
Well, I did that more as representation. I think maybe we should look at some other communities, maybe the same size, and
Okay. If you think it's premature to do that until you've got more data,
I'd like to maybe another few weeks of pulling together some more bylaws.
Some more,
okay, and I will, if you don't mind, I will take apart these documents and cut and paste it so that you can see the difference of the ones that we've been presented here. There's about 4 of them, I think.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
What stood out about Hingham?
Well, it's the way Hingham addressed the issue. Hang on a minute, if I can find it.
I don't know if Hingham, is Hingham in there?
Sorry?
Is Hingham part of one of the ones, I know I had
Yes.
read, I had read it.
Yes, absolutely. Hang on, I gotta find it. It takes a little bit of time digging through here. I'm trying to find where Hingham is.
I
Which
think
one is it? Do you know, remember, John, which one was it? Third one or the fourth one?
Does Newbury have a 5-member board or a 3-member board of selectmen? Do we know?
West Newbury? Actually, I'm not
Hingham is
sure.
number 7, John. It's way at the end.
Okay, number 7?
I'm not sure about it. Right here, number 7. Chapter 263, an act relative, so it's page, oh, well, here. Just take mine. Because I have a digital version of it.
Exhibit 7.
See, I've highlighted it, so
That's fine.
I'm trying to find it. I'm not doing too well here.
Well, not to put you on the spot, I thought it's something that
Well, there was something here
stood out in
that
your
I
mind.
thought was really good. If I can find it, that is, it should jump out. When I find it, I'll let you, I'll read it.
So
I'll have a
what-
go.
So why don't we take two independent steps here? John will continue his research and pull some resources for us. In the meantime, go ahead and begin the process that you had suggested
What we have.
with what we have.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. That makes
Now, whether you
perfect sense.
stitch it or cut and paste, it doesn't matter.
No, absolutely. And the more cut and pastes we have, the better. But don't overwhelm me. It seems to me that we've got 7. If you can come up with, say, another 7, I think 14 is more than enough.
Well, there's one thing we don't have to do is reinvent the wheel, because
That's
this
my
Right.
point.
has been done so much in,
Exactly.
Well, it's
That's my
interesting.
point.
in the
Who's done it well?
Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I read, I put these together because I thought they were the most representative.
Right.
But some of them I read, some towns only have 1 paragraph describing what
Really?
their administrators should do. And
Topsfield like.
the town administrator in Essex, I think, I looked to see whether they had anything in writing other than there's a picture of him on the website, and he says, "I act through and by the selectmen." That was it.
Keep it simple.
Wenham, I couldn't find anything in writing like this, but they did the town administrator's contract online, and it reads like a bylaw. You will do this, you will do that. That's another approach to the.
So I had a quick question. You said governments are tending to be triangle in shape,
That's
pyramid.
supposedly, from my reading, that's the trend that's been going.
So clearly, a town manager would be the top,
Well,
but would an administrator or the Board of Selectmen be, does that depend on the role of the administrator?
One of the things I took away from the research was that there's really no definition in Massachusetts law of what is a town administrator or what is a town manager. So you could probably, if you wanted to risk public ire, call it the town czar, you know. We're not quite there yet in this country, but,
Well, you
anyhow.
said through and by the selectmen, and
That's under the statute,
Okay.
chapter 40. That's more the agent, accident and agency relationship. There are certain towns, like the town of Danvers, that by statute, they have a town manager, board of selectmen, and then they have a representative town meeting where they elect 10 people from 8 precincts. And it's not an open town meeting. That's a particular statutory type of, we can't even qualify because we're not big enough.
so you would basically say the more detailed we can be as far as their role and scope of their job description, the better control it would be for the,
Yeah, I wouldn't leave it
Selectmen.
too open-ended.
okay,
trust me.
of course.
All right,
I found the section.
you did.
The Hingham section that I liked was,
Why don't you appraise us?
What section is it, John?
"The Board of Selectmen shall provide the town administrator with an annual job performance review with input from department heads and employees and members of elected and appointed boards. As part of its annual review, the board shall evaluate the town administrator's performance, including the town administrator's ability to supervise municipal employees properly, administer town government effectively, effectuate policy, and accomplish established goals." I thought that was very crisp and right to the point. The only concern I guess I have is if you ask everyone, once the person first comes in, to do the job, and then starts essentially doing the job and creating all kinds of waves. My concern is that if you do that too early, and you put too much emphasis on it, that then they might well turn on that new administrator and make his life a misery. And that's my concern, that in the evaluation process, it's going to be difficult. I think after 2 years, maybe that would be the time to do that.
Could you read again the line about the policy?
As part of the annual review, the board shall evaluate the town administrator's performance, including the town administrator's ability to, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Supervise municipal employees properly. Administer town government effectively. Effectuate policy and accomplish established goals.
Okay, the effectuate the policy, I didn't hear that. I don't, we don't want to, I can't see, I don't have a vision of an administrator setting policy.
Well, that's the point. The selectmen do that.
Right, because then we
So
don't
the
need all the selectmen for
effectuate the
anything.
policy is effectuating what the selectmen want.
Exactly.
Effectuating is
Exactly.
the operative
So
word.
it's not giving
Yes.
up all of that,
Exactly.
relinquishing all that
Another
power.
issue, I think, if you're evaluating to even have a professional administrator, since we have a 5-person board of selectmen, is, do you want to make it a strong town administrator / manager, or do you want to make it a weak town manager / administrator? And that's in the sense, do you want to have him, can you remove him or her at a 3 out of 5 vote or a 4 out of 5 vote? A strong administrator is 4 out of 5, weak administrator is 3 out of 5.
Didn't know that.
How long are the terms or contracts typically?
Well,
How many
usually-
years?
3
The
years.
statute, the bylaw one, the statute, 4123A calls for a 1 or 3 year contract. But you can have a contract and someone, you can still remove somebody who's under contract if they violate.
Of course.
certain- You don't want.
But that's where the 3 or 4 vote would step in, right? Okay.
And you don't want a revolving door of administrators, because there's one community I always have in mind, and I will not mention the name, but
It happens.
one former town manager referred to it, they've changed managers so often, it's a banana republic. And that's because the selectmen try to constantly interfere with what the manager is trying to do. And that's where you want to set up a situation, I think, where selectmen do policy and only get involved if there's really something wrong going on in town with respect to the way departments are being run or employees are up in arms about something.
So we have 4 agenda items. We just completed the first one, the review of relevant laws, and we have 2 actionables. John is going to do a little bit of
Cut and
take-
paste?
cut and paste and stitch.
Right.
And thank you, John, and John Christopher will continue feeding us with more reading materials, but seriously, you know, if you can dig up more examples, and I think that's a great idea. The second agenda item is, let's have a discussion, and I'll open up with Mike as well. I'd like to get your opinion, but let's open up the discussion about what is the difference between a town manager and town administrator, and let's see if we can hold ourselves to the discipline of not suggesting which one we like. Just, what's the difference, pros and cons? Cut and paste, cut and dry, rather. Mike, your opinion.
Well, I think the town it's really just a question of authority, how much authority they have. So I'm under the impression that a town manager would have more authority and be able to act more independently of the selectmen. So if a board of selectmen really just wanted to come into the meeting once a couple weeks, and then they go home and that's it, and they don't do anything between the meetings, a town manager is a good person to have. I personally, I don't see much difference between the two. It's a matter of degree, I guess. That's what I think.
Down on paper and what you give to that person. I think in the beginning, when they started getting the home rule in 1966, as I stated in the memorandum, a lot of communities were afraid of using the word town manager because they feared that the people in town would say, wait a minute, you know, this town manager, we're losing control here now. But it's really the written document that creates the position is going to determine whether he's a town manager, town administrator, or you could call him something else or her something else. So it's really all in the written document itself.
So there's no statutory relevance for administrator or town manager? There isn't a statute that says if you use this statute, you create an administrator? It's whatever.
There is the bylaw, it says town administrator or executive secretary. And I would argue, since it doesn't mention town manager, you shouldn't be using that statute to create a town manager position. And then, like I said, there are certain towns that have town manager, representative town meeting, and board of selectmen, and we don't qualify for that. Other than that, it's basically, there's no definition of what a statutory town manager or statutory town administrator does.
You pointed out in your document here, you say, the perception that town managers are inherently more powerful than town administrators or coordinators does not reflect the reality of the textual language of the legal instruments creating these positions.
That's essentially.
In other words, it's what you write in the document, whether they are really powerful people or not. West Newbury clearly is not having a very powerful one, and I suspect it's because they're just putting their toe in the water.
John, when you say the town manager is what you direct them to be, or whatever,
That's it, it's what-
define
I
them.
don't think the name really means anything.
Right, but that direction will come from the Board of Selectmen, correct?
Well, I would advise that you have a written document, broadly written to outline his powers. And, there'd be certain particularities with respect to the community that you might want to have a document a little bit different, let's say, than Georgetown or West Newbury. But it's really all in what you put down on paper. And the more you put down on paper, I think the better off you are, because you don't want to have vagueness where all of a sudden an administrator
Definitive.
slips into doing something that he really shouldn't be doing or she shouldn't be doing. Or else, the selectmen, tell him or her to start doing stuff that they don't even have the authority to act upon. It's a little bit of a delicate balance, and I think a lot of
balance.
thought would have to go into whatever we create or recommend. And then the selectmen may look at it and say, we don't like like this, let's get our pen out and we'll start changing the language.
Probably what happened to West Newton.
That's always the reality.
Is that what happened in
I
Westminster?
don't know, John, I'm wondering.
What can
Joe,
you-
don't you feel that there's an urgency from the Board of Selectmen
Well, I
to
do.
do this quickly?
Well, I do, but that's not necessarily healthy.
Well, I'm not, but they're the ones that gave us this
Yes.
charge.
No, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but the charge did not include a deadline.
Okay.
Charge allowed discretion for us to set a
To do-
deadline
To do this work.
by how to do the work. And, well, if you ask my opinion, I try not to be the last to talk here because I'm the chair, but whether it's a town administrator or a town manager, we've got to get it right. That person has to be the chief procurement officer, the chief financial officer, the personnel director. When people come to work for the town of Groveland, they know who their boss is, and it can never be and should never be, even remotely, even on a friendly basis, a Board of Selectmen member. And also that town administrator and town manager should also be, we should, as a town, be able to say, here, we're going to now make this department under you. We're no longer gonna have a superintendent of blankety-blank department, we're gonna have you be in charge of this department. So those are the basics, you know, chief financial officer, chief procurement officer, liaison with the departments, in charge potentially of some departments that we may suggest later. So I don't care what we call it, if we can. Board of Selectmen to perform governance and not administration, then that's fine. And actually, I'm relieved to hear that there isn't it's just a name. It's what we write as a job description. That's the statute
Exactly.
supports that. It doesn't, that there's a statute for administrative versus a statute for, the
Only like I said,
statute is
those pa-
silent as to what we call
Those
it.
particular towns definitely have to have a town manager by name, like Danvers and a few others, but they're in the minority. But any community this size, or even larger communities, that they can call the person what they want and give the person this.
I had a question. The document that gives them the authority to do whatever is in the job description, when and how does that job description change? Because if it's at the whim of the Board of Selectmen, you could end up with a massive, you know, somebody gets elected or re-elected and then they change it. And is it for the life of the contract, the 1 or 3 years, or is that just
I think-
free-floating?
I think the way you come up with your bylaw or your special act, which outlines in broadly the position and the areas of responsibility, and then basically, a contract could be written anyway. It could be 2 sentences, it could be 2 paragraphs, it could be 8 paragraphs. Like I said, the town of Wenham, they put his contract online, so I looked at it, and it's almost as, you know, written like Hingham's bylaw is, so.
Like you said, it's a fine line. You don't want it to be,
Contract for a town administrator in the sense that he or she go from there, you know, and that's something that the new person will negotiate with the Board of Selectmen too, and he or she may have their own little particularities she'd like in there. But it would definitely be, the contract would be you are subject to the provisions of the bylaw. And, let it go with that.
Mike, any thoughts, opinion, questions?
Well, I guess, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but I don't understand exactly how some of this is any different than what we have now, what we had now under the current position that Denise had, except maybe the amount of authority she had to hire and fire, but it's a matter of degree. I mean, she was in charge of finance, personnel, procurement, you know, somewhat
it-
directing the departments.
But these were just duties that were given to her, like, hey Denise, by the way, now that you're here.
I
Well,
think it grew into that
Right.
versus.
no, not
being-
really. I mean, it was definitely part of her job description.
She was- I know the finance director bylaw, I looked at that, because I helped write it. And it's very specific with respect to her duties as finance director, but it really didn't mention anything about personnel or making sure people punch in at 8:30 and go home at 4 and things like that.
I think personnel was added.
Yeah, I'm,
Personnel bylaw was amended so that she would,
That's what
I think things were added, and we were very fortunate. Denise was very capable, very dedicated, but it got blurry for me as to what was statutorily based in that position, the way it was created, meaning the finance director. And my concern, even when I was on the Board of Selectmen, not directed to any person, either board member or to Denise or anybody in that position, but were we going down the path as a tope of that position? And I think that, I think we were heading down that way. If anyone challenges me and say, well, give me a specific, I can't, I'll be honest with you. But it's just a gut feeling that tells me we were expanding. I believe the personnel piece is definitely one example that we both experienced.
Appears
when
there were a
on the
lot of
board.
add-ons.
I'm sorry?
It appeared to me there were a lot of add-ons,
Add-on,
it grew and grew.
And it was based on the fact that, you being a Board of Selectmen and me being in the chair, you're feeling that pressure that you want to see things managed properly. But we also felt the pressure that we were not administrators, Board of Selectmen. We're supposed to do one thing. It's the G word, governance, set policy and so forth. So I think we may differ with your opinion about that, Mike.
I think Joe's point about not having a written document, but just adding on responsibilities, you always leave yourself open to some type of lawsuit by some malcontent who will say this is beyond the authority of the administrator, this is beyond the authority of the select persons to give the administrator this responsibility. You have nothing in writing to support this.
Right,
It's a very good
In today's
point.
society, someone can file a lawsuit for almost anything.
or anything, exactly. So we were lucky.
Yeah, so imagine if we were in a situation where someone had to be let go. Well, who was going to make the decision? Was it going to be the person that we delegated to be the personnel director, or does it go back to, it gets murky? And I think that
Those are all issues that should be hammered out in writing.
that should be really,
Right of an appeal of an employee if they're let
Should-
go by,
Excuse me, this personnel issue, should that be in the document as well?
I think we should probably, from what I've been seeing, is that they do have personnel director responsibility. Maybe not written in that word. Certainly, if you're moving to a more centralized form of government, being a personnel director. I think some towns, the hiring and firing is done by the administrator with the advice and consent of the Board of Selectmen. A person always has a right to appeal to the selectmen if they feel they're being treated unfairly as an employee, if they're termination. And that's probably a wise thing, because it puts a level of let's say, cooling off, so to speak, so that a person can maybe go to the selectmen and say, I don't think I was terminated properly. Maybe they could mediate bringing the person back, or at least avoid a lawsuit. And I think when we did that board, when we expanded the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, I think it was Lisa Doobie, she was pushing for administrator even back then. And I remember her saying that an administrator could at least avoid some of the landmines of litigation that we basically don't have now unless you're constantly calling town council. And most
I think that happened a lot.
most professional administrators, even if they're not attorneys, they'll, through their public administration degree or a master's degree, they'll have some background in municipal employment law, you know, at least be able to know when it's time either to make a decision or call town council then. So,
Yeah, so I made a list there: Chief Financial Officer, Procurement Officer, Compliance Officer, and Personnel Manager. Those are the 4 things that we feel that we could expand into a job description that will go outside the boundaries of the existing finance director position we have now comfortably. Otherwise, those are all stretches.
Are they, excuse me, this is a
Not all, but those, some of those
Yeah,
could
no,
be
no,
stretches.
I understand. Question, the finance, do we have a finance director yet?
What is the current situation now? No, we don't. No.
So are we going to get one? Or are they waiting for us to deliver and then they'll get one?
I think I read that there was a search committee was formed. I think the building inspector was one of the members of the screening committee. So I know there was some direction. I don't know what the status is now, but there was going to be a temporary coming in as a finance director, because you might be, well, West Newbury had eliminated the whole finance director position and put it all in the town manager.
Oh, well, that's understandable.
Point of order? Can people hear you online? Can you repeat that, please, for us?
So they have, they hired an interim finance director.
West Newbury.
No, here.
Plus,
Here,
Here
here.
we go.
Here.
So, it was like a few meetings ago, so they're doing contract negotiations, but it's interim, so it's temporary, for a year, I think? I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, in my original proposal to the Board of Selectmen, I did say that if our study committee was able to make significant decisions, we could have a draft document by Thanksgiving. And then certainly proceed from there. And I've made some suggestions about, as you probably know, with public hearings and, get it out to the public before town meeting. But I am really, I don't know how you all feel about it, but I'm really intrigued about the two-step method. Bylaw?
Hingham, the way
Yeah.
Hingham did it.
Yeah.
You
That
could even
seems-
put in the, if you're gonna go do a bylaw, you could even write the bylaw in such a way that this bylaw is, it's understood that the town will also go forward with special acts legislation upon which the bylaw will either be incorporated into the special acts legislation or the bylaw will be repealed. Because
Well-
after a year under the bylaw, you may wanna change and put it in special acts and.
Andrew, your opinion about that?
I think that's the route to go. Fixes the immediate need of the position and to assist the Board of Selectmen, and then cementing in that position with the legislation for the foreseeable future.
Betty, your thoughts?
I'd like Andrew just said, how he broke that down. I think that would be a good step for us to take. So it can be evolving, right? Okay, that works, don't you think?
And it would probably, in a sense, it's a toe-in-the-water approach, and it
Right.
would give the Board of Selectmen thought that this process is going on for a year anyhow. Maybe with our special acts legislation, we might want to add this, and this. And, instead of just jumping in feet first with special acts, and then having to go back to the legislature the following year and make further changes. So,
Okay. John, your feeling on it?
I think Andy put it well.
Mike?
I agree with that.
Well, we have consensus. We don't have to take a vote, but we have consensus, meaningful consensus that gives us a little bit of homework assignment to figure out how to structure a bylaw, a two-step method where we implement the town administrator or town manager through a bylaw, then actually hire someone, one-year contract, sounds very appealing to me, and it sounds obviously to you as well. Gives us that flexibility to modify and tweak,
Fine tune is the word.
fine tune it, and then at some point in the future, we go to the legislature and say, okay, we figured out what we want to do here, we've been doing it for a year or two, would you approve a law so that it becomes durable? What is the risk of the bylaw, however? You said the town meeting, some people could torpedo it.
Could repeal it.
Feel it.
Well, that's the risk that we may want to take as a committee if we suggest.
Thing is, there's no perfect route, at any rate.
I would point out if the town of Topsfield, when they went the route of using a bylaw, and they did that in 2005, so they've been operating under it for 15 years. They also took, I believe, well over a year with a study committee to come up with the bylaw before they enacted it at town meeting. So it was like an 18-month process. But they looked at their whole government. I think they they made a.
The intricacies of the town at this juncture until we hired somebody to do the job and takes on this job. And then the selectmen and that person can sort out what they really think the structure should be. I don't think this committee should be doing that. If we start getting into that, it'll be a dog's breakfast. It'll be everywhere.
It'll be a 10-year project.
It'll
too.
be, exactly. So I think we
master
should
plan.
just stay with what we've sort of outlined at this juncture and not get overly ambitious and walk into trying to manipulate or rather think about how the government should be working in Groveland. That's not our job.
Well, that fits with the two-step process, because in order to eliminate certain departments or restructure the town government to the depth that you might want to do requires to do it by special act legislation anyway. So, you know, if you hired someone under a bylaw and then they work with the selectmen to look at the structure, then part of the special act legislation could be including not just enacting the
Right.
administrative, but also fixing all the other
That's good.
suggestions.
I would suggest that, knowing how busy an administrator will be when he or she gets here, that this committee stay in existence or recess until he or she gets here after we do our work, and have this committee come back and work with the town administrator who will be in communication. And because I'm sure he doesn't want to sit in his office, or she doesn't want to sit in the office all day and just restructure government. They have a lot of important things. So I think after the administrator comes on board, the administrator could be an advisor to this board to go and look at consolidate the finance director bylaw back 20 years ago. Call in different department heads, get a feeling what their problems are. And we've already heard, there may be some problems in certain, elected positions trying to run, certain areas of the town, and it's getting too complex. And here, to the town administrator, and he can talk to the selectmen about it.
I think that makes some sense. I think until we have that person, we won't know what they feel about it. But I think it's an idea that we could, if they wanted us.
I have a feeling that the person we hire will probably, based upon their education, probably have an idea in their mind to begin with how to take a town that's, and is putting its toe in the water towards centralization, and what, he or she may have an idea that, this is the way I recommend it. It's probably has it all out on paper, so who knows?
The third agenda item is a vote for a suggestion to initiate draft document to recommend either a town manager or town administrator. I think we've touched upon that, and that's a moot point, it seems to be, because it doesn't really matter. What we have explored here from the first agenda item to discuss the relevant statutes and ultimately the pathways is what we've just concluded in discussion, and that is consider what we are going to term as a committee, the two-step method. So we can, let me move on, and then we'll tie some things together here. The fourth agenda item was to review, consider reviewing department changes, government functions, and functions in town departments that will complement either a town manager or a town administrator. Not that we were gonna complete that work here, but if we're gonna use the pathway of a bylaw to implement and then modify and develop, then exactly what John said, he or she is gonna be a great consultant for us, for our work, and for the Board of Selectmen, as to how to change and what to change,
I would recommend.
instead of us doing the work from
I would
scratch.
recommend though, as kind of a corollary to, excuse me, number 4, I think we need to take a look at our bylaw and our finance bylaw with respect to the fact that the person who comes in is going to have certain responsibilities here, and they may have to be modified or even eliminated. The finance director bylaw says there shall be a finance director. Now, you could interpret that to mean it could still be the town administrator, but you might want to say, eliminate that section of the finance director bylaw and say the finance director, at the discretion of the selectmen, shall also be the town administrator. May come a day when the town is big enough that we have a town administrator and a finance director. I don't think we're quite there yet, but
It's a very intriguing thought.
looking at the personnel bylaw too, because that may
Yeah.
have to be modified.
It's a very intriguing thought. If we're gonna have a town administrator and let's just call it a town manager from here on, just to make it simple. If we're gonna have a town manager, if you will, please, less words. If we're gonna have a town manager, we're not gonna also have a finance director. We're all in agreement with that. But I think we need to collapse or delete the finance director bylaw.
Is it, I think we may be straying from our charge of saying we're gonna have an administrator, not a finance. I think that in the end, it's going to be the selectmen's call, whether they wanna combine the positions. All I'm saying is we should look at the bylaw in personnel and finance. In the event, combine the positions, these sections of those personnel and finance bylaws have to be eliminated.
Right. So I'm gonna ask Catherine to send us the personnel bylaw.
Online,
Get them online? Okay, that's fine.
general bylaws.
I'll make that my homework assignment. I'll focus on that a little bit.
I'll take a look at it too.
Yeah,
finance.
okay. That'd be great.
Are we done?
Well,
Sounds good.
That's it.
it's a very efficient meeting. I can't help it.
We have our assignments, don't we?
We get assignments, we have action. You're gonna cut and paste. John is doing research. I'm gonna look at personnel bylaws, finance director bylaws. Let me just review the agenda, make sure we haven't missed anything. Yeah, I mean, the great discovery tonight is, at least for me, is, the bylaw. You know what, if you'll allow me, I have an opinion about that. I was part of the process of transforming the board from 3 to 5, and we had a committee that did that. And I think we did our work really well. We debated well, we researched well, we didn't rush it. But what was really well done is that we communicated it to the public, and the public, the general, as many voters as would like to vote in Groveland came out and voted for or against it. And the bylaw is a great way to get the transparency started. And people are actually going to, if it works, they actually will have town administrator or manager to support it, again, in a more durable form when we ask people to come back at town meeting and public session, that we have to decide again at a second town meeting that we want the special legislation.
And special legislation, from what I read, is custom, requires the town to put that issue before the vote.
Now, neither one of those pathways, however, require or allow a ballot question. Neither one.
You don't necessarily have to do it, but like the research I did, the legislature in special acts almost always requires it as part of the special act. Like when we went from 3 to 5, that went out on a ballot.
Okay, that's even better.
Yeah.
Even better, because that's the whole point.
There's nothing prohibiting us from putting
Yeah.
anything on a ballot.
I mean, we can't make an historic change in government because it's the desire of a few of us.
Right.
We have to think outside the box and outside the needs of the current Board of Selectmen, who we understand and respect, and say, are we doing the right thing strategically for the town? Is it durable? Is it something that 100 years change, and it has to be done with as much input as possible from the public? If it fails, it fails. If it wins, it wins. But I want to sleep at night knowing the people decided.
Right.
It wasn't a committee, it wasn't 3 or 4 situation. That's why I won't feel that it's pressuring me in any way or any of us to do this in a particular rush. We're just trying to be mindful and respectful that there is a bit of an urgency that's been communicated openly when I made my presentation.
So if the next town meeting annual is April, May, maybe.
Yeah.
Be the end of April.
We have between now and at least February to,
Well, I did put in my original proposal, not attend when they decided to go ahead and form this committee and develop the charge. I did suggest a document by Thanksgiving, and then a final document by January, February, then it could be something that could be presented to the town in the spring. It is possible, especially if it's a bylaw.
Could you send me the proposal?
I
Copy of
will. I'll give it a copy to you right now.
it? Thank you.
And don't cut and paste any of it. I'm just kidding.
If there's good stuff in it, I might. Thank you.
And this is an alternate approach. You'll find the charter method in there that was presented
Fine.
back. So thank you. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to go,
When's our next meeting, Joe?
well, I think in 2 weeks would be, or what do you
yeah,
suggest?
2 weeks, we can.
Yeah. Be in a study committee, if you provide us with the things to study, then 2 weeks out, we will have studied them, and we can have more
Do you
actionables.
want to give them to me before the meeting so I can incorporate it?
Oh,
or-
yeah, I'll try to get something to you by, what's today, the 15th? Try to get you
Great.
some stuff by the 22nd, and
Great.
you'll have,
Sounds like a good idea.
and I'll circulate it online so people can at least read it, and then
Right.
John can cut and paste what he wants. and-
So sharing information, as I mentioned last time, is fine, as long as we're not responding and chit-chatting with each other. We don't want to
You've
violate
got-
open meeting law.
Have you got Georgetown's thing?
For some reason, I had trouble locating it. I know it exists.
Okay. Well, maybe you could call them and ask them.
That's probably the easiest way. But, although sometimes you call towns now, yeah, don't bother us.
Don't bother. You got a point.
But if I could somehow get into the state library, I think the state library has all, I've communicated with the state library on other matters. I think just by email, if I email the librarian, he'll get back to me and say, go to this section.
Okay, that would be
It's
good.
good.
Because I know, the reason why I ask about Georgetown is because I know people are going to ask, well, what about, how did Georgetown do it? Like, how did West Newbury do it?
I know Georgetown didn't do it by bylaw. They have a bylaw, but it's a special acts
Okay,
bylaw.
okay,
I know that.
okay.
Topsfield's one of the rarities I found in Hingham, but then they jumped to special acts.
Topsail was very short and sweet.
And Essex is a 4123A. It's even sweeter and shorter. I think at the back of the memorandum, they list a whole group of towns and how they went about doing it. So I think the bylaw that we're contemplating, very few towns have that as a permanent form of their government.
Right. There are not too many hybrids like Hingham, though, are there?
No, surprisingly, they just decide to do it when they, I have a feeling that they probably, some of the larger towns, the 10,000, 12,000 people, they probably had someone working with the Board of Selectmen, like, well, Nancy was here,
Right.
someone like that, and they at least had someone in place to really run day-to-day what's going on. And they took
It's
their
something
time.
she would have done. This were happening.
The big thing is to get something in writing that's effective, that looks to the future, that perhaps will keep us from getting out too much trouble with
Exactly.
the legal system, and go from there. It will just be interesting to see how the selectmen react to what we
Exactly,
put
yeah.
together. Hopefully, it will be of great help. And
John, could you send me another copy of this? I've marked mine up. I'd like you could, if you've got another one?
Yeah. Mike, you want to pass that down?
Oh, thank you.
We've got copies, so. So I'm gonna go around in a minute, but before I do that,
Thanks.
shall we set an agenda? Can you provide me with some input as to what our agenda should be for September 30th? If we go out 2 weeks.
Well, review of the
29.
cut and paste for a
29.
start.
Discussion of cut and paste material.
Review of cut and paste.
Stitch or cut? Review of common,
Assemblage of fractured parts of different proposals.
review of common structures and processes
Procedures.
and procedures. Just give me a minute, I'm gonna type this out now, live and unrehearsed. Implemented in other municipalities.
Right.
Give me a second. That are relevant to meeting our town's needs. Okay, what else? What else shall we talk about?
I think when you've got the document, you're gonna find there's a lot there, and you're gonna find there's a lot of discussion on each item. Quite frankly, I think when we bring that in, I think you'll spend all your time on that. Don't think you'll need anything else,
No.
to be honest with you.
Discussion and possible vote of items discovered at meeting from previous agenda item. Good. Good enough. Simple. We are, I believe the room is needed, but we can hold ourselves to 90 minutes typically. I think we can. Parting thoughts. Betty?
I think that in a short time, we covered a lot of information and what direction we should go in. I think, well, I'm not saying that it's etched in stone, but where we're leaning. And
They're moving along.
I think we're making progress. It's only the second meeting.
Andrew?
I think we're off to a good start. We know the direction we're headed, as stated before, and I think the timeline of, prior to Thanksgiving or the town meeting is obtainable at the rate we're going, and should be fine. Shouldn't be a problem.
John?
I'm happy with it. It's going the way I wanted it to go.
Thank you. And you've got a lot of work to do, so we appreciate it. And Michael?
Yes, I agree too. I think we're going in the right direction.
If I could ask you one more question.
Sure.
You had brought at the last meeting your concerns and your desire to see leadership.
Okay.
Can you expand a little bit about that, and are we heading in the right direction to address that?
Well, I think that's going to come into play when we really start putting words on what this person is going to do. So I think we don't want ultimately, we don't want this person to be a follower, just do whatever the selectmen tell them to do. We want this person to be a leader, to lead the town, including the selectmen, in the right direction.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. John?
No, I think we've made some good progress. We're focused and we know what to do. And that being said, a little of my research I left out because it really wasn't relevant, but I looked at the town of Danvers because I found out that when they went to incorporate and become a town in 1754, King George II wouldn't give them a charter.
Wouldn't give them the charter?
No, so their town seal says, Town of Danvers Incorporated 1754, the king unwilling.
Really?
Was related to Danvers Osborne, a baron in England. And he suggested they name the town after his relative in England.
My goodness.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of,
Interesting.
so you're on the right committee. I mean, you've got Danvers on the right track, so.
Maybe I'm an echo from the past.
Well, you're
If
gonna,
you ever look at the Town of Danvers seal, if you, in Town Hall, you'll see this as the king unwilling. And the king didn't want to give them a charter supposedly because he didn't want too many more members of the general court, which wasn't a bad idea.
well, that calls to mind that we're unwilling to appoint kings. It's a delicate balance here. I've added one more agenda item, if you'll allow me, just if we can fit it in. Review of the process of implementing a bylaw to be followed by special legislation. Just kind of
Yep.
dig into that a little bit, because that'll be interesting for people to understand that. Be interesting for me to understand that, too, so. Okay, very well.
We're good?
Appreciate it. To adjourn.
You have.
Second.
Discussion. All right. Well, thank you very much. Well done. We'll
Thank
see you in
you.
a couple of weeks.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.